On November 4, 1970, a woman and her 13-year-old daughter walked into a social services office in Temple City, California. The girl, who would later be known as Genie Wiley, immediately caught the attention of a social worker. She appeared much younger than her actual age, had an unusual way of walking, and struggled with basic coordination. She didn't speak, seemed withdrawn, and showed signs of severe neglect. Concerned for the child's well-being, social workers contacted the authorities, and Genie was soon placed in protective care. A medical evaluation revealed she was severely malnourished, had physical abnormalities, and was unaccustomed to human interaction. It was clear that she had suffered extreme isolation, but the full extent of her story was only beginning to emerge. Genie's real name was kept private to protect her identity, and her case became a significant focus for researchers studying language development and the effects of social deprivation. To understand what had happened to her, investigators looked into her family's past. Genie's parents, Irene and Clark Wiley, lived an isolated and controlled life. Clark was strict, controlling, and often violent toward Irene. Over time, his behavior became increasingly restrictive. He disliked noise and kept the household unnaturally quiet, speaking only in hushed tones. Tragically, before Genie was born, the couple had already suffered the loss of 2 children, one due to illness and another under troubling circumstances. Their third child, John Wiley, initially struggled with developmental delays, likely due to neglect. Concerned about his well-being, Clark's mother intervened, taking John in for a period to help him catch up developmentally. Clark had a deep attachment to his mother, who played a major role in his life, sometimes even at the expense of his relationship with his wife and children. Genie's discovery marked the beginning of a long journey for her, one filled with challenges and breakthroughs as experts sought to help her adapt to the world she had been kept from for so long. Her case remains one of the most well-known in the study of human development and the effects of extreme isolation. Clark Wiley's mother played a major role in the family's life, even providing financial support during difficult times. In April 1957, Irene gave birth to a baby girl, later known as Genie. For the first several months, Genie's early life seemed relatively similar to that of her older brother, John. However, everything changed in December 1958 when tragedy struck. Their grandmother was killed in an accident involving a drunk driver. This event deeply affected Clark, who became increasingly withdrawn and paranoid. Already strict and controlling, he now took extreme measures to isolate his family from the outside world. He moved them into his late mother's house and insisted that her bedroom remain untouched, preserving it as a shrine. The family lived primarily in the living room, while Genie was gradually confined to a small back bedroom. At first, Genie was occasionally allowed outside in the yard or placed in a playpen, but over time her world became smaller and more restricted. Clark's paranoia intensified, and he limited her movements until she was no longer permitted to leave the room. As a young child, not even 2 years old, she was left in near total isolation. The room had only a few pieces of furniture, and Genie spent most of her time in a confined space with little to no interaction. Any attempt she made to communicate was met with harsh discipline, and her environment remained eerily silent. Even basic needs such as food were handled with minimal interaction. The few moments she spent around others were strictly controlled, and she had no opportunity to develop language or social skills. This extreme isolation continued for years, shaping Genie's development in ways that would later become the focus of intense psychological and linguistic study. When she was finally discovered, authorities and researchers were confronted with the devastating effects of long-term social deprivation, sparking discussions on the importance of human connection and ethical considerations in scientific research. If Genie had difficulty eating or refused food, she faced punishment. Over time, she learned to remain silent, spending her days confined in the same small space with little stimulation or movement. This extreme isolation lasted for years, deeply affecting her physical and emotional development. According to researchers who later studied her case, there were additional aspects of her mistreatment that remain undisclosed, leaving the full extent of her suffering unknown. To put it into perspective, think about all the experiences a child has between the ages of 2 and 13. Learning, growing, playing, forming relationships. Genie, however, spent those crucial years in almost total deprivation. During this time, her mother, Irene, developed severe vision problems, leaving her largely unable to intervene. In October 1970, when Genie was 13, a turning point came. After a heated argument, Irene insisted on contacting her own parents. Clark, controlling as ever, initially refused but eventually gave in. Later that day, while Clark was away, Irene took Genie and left to stay with her parents. 3 weeks later, Irene brought Genie to a social services office, where her condition immediately raised alarm. She was placed into protective care, marking the beginning of her long journey of recovery. Genie's initial medical assessments revealed the extent of her neglect. She struggled to walk properly, having spent years with restricted movement. She had difficulty chewing solid food, and her speech was nearly non-existent. She had learned to suppress almost all vocalization. Due to prolonged malnutrition, she was small and underweight for her age. Decades of isolation had also affected her eyesight, limiting her ability to perceive distances beyond the small space she had lived in. Despite these challenges, Genie slowly began to respond to care. She started imitating words spoken to her, though she spoke in an unusual, breathy tone, as if afraid of making too much noise. Her delayed responses to instructions suggested a distorted sense of time, possibly caused by the extreme monotony of her early life. Genie's case attracted significant attention from researchers, particularly in the fields of linguistics and psychology. Scientists had long studied the effects of social isolation on development through controlled experiments, such as studies on animals raised in restricted environments. But Genie represented a rare and tragic real-world case. Her experience raised profound ethical questions about both scientific research and the fundamental need for human interaction in childhood development. Experiments on social isolation have been conducted on animals, but applying such methods to humans would be unthinkable. Yet in Genie's case, her parents had inadvertently created what scientists called the forbidden experiment, a unique, tragic opportunity to study language acquisition in extreme deprivation. Psychologists, neurologists, and linguists were eager to learn from her, drawn to the case in ways that were both scientific and deeply human. It would be easy to view this as pure exploitation. Scientists gathering around a tragic figure, extracting data without regard for her well-being. But the reality was more complex. Over the next few years, Genie moved between different foster homes, each with its own approach to rehabilitation. She was subjected to numerous tests and studies, but many of those researching her case seemed to genuinely care for her. Unfortunately, the competing ambitions of various experts led to a struggle over how she should be treated, with Genie caught in the middle. If you're interested in the conflicts surrounding her case, Russ Reimer's book Genie, A Scientific Tragedy provides a detailed account. Despite her difficult past, Genie's curiosity about the world was clear. Though she initially showed little interaction with other children, seemingly unaware of them as individuals, she was fascinated by objects around her. She would point at things, seeking to learn their names, and over time she began repeating words. By 1971, she could use single-word phrases to express her needs. A year later, she was forming two-word combinations, and soon after she managed short phrases like, "I will see Mama Saturday." Sometimes she used gestures in place of words to communicate more complex ideas. There was hope that she would eventually develop full language skills. However, at some point her progress seemed to stall. Learning words was one thing, but forming language required an understanding of rules and structures that most people acquire naturally. Despite all her efforts, Genie struggled with this, highlighting just how crucial early childhood development is in shaping a person's ability to communicate. One of the major discoveries from Genie's case related to language acquisition. As Russ Reimer explains in Genie, a scientific tragedy, certain sentence structures feel natural to us, even though we may not consciously understand why. For example, I gave the book to John can be reworded as I gave John the book, and both sound fine. However, I donated the book to John cannot be changed to I donated John the book without sounding unnatural. This is because verbs of Anglo-Saxon origin like give can switch between these structures, while Latinate verbs like donate cannot. This is just one of the countless language rules we absorb effortlessly as children, without being explicitly taught. According to linguist Eric Lenneberg, natural first language acquisition occurs during a critical period, from around age 2 until puberty. Unfortunately, these were the exact years Genie spent in isolation. No matter how much effort was put into teaching her afterward, she would never fully acquire a complete language system. Even so, she managed to express some things about her past, often in heartbreaking ways. She would say things like, "Father hit big stick. Father hit Genie big stick. Father take piece would hit cry." Her behavior also revealed lingering trauma. She had an unusual attachment to plastic containers, hoarding Tupperware and buckets, an obsession that likely stemmed from the rare occasions when she was given an empty cottage cheese container as a toy. She also had an intense, irrational fear of dogs, even small puppies. Eventually, researchers learned why. Her father had stood outside her door making growling noises to frighten her into silence. Some reports even claim he deliberately grew his nails long so he could scratch her face. As for Clark Wiley, the man responsible for her suffering, he never faced justice. Just a month after Genie was rescued and before his scheduled court appearance, he took his own life. He left behind a brief note. "The world will never understand." Sadly, Genie's story does not have a happy ending. She made steady progress in her early years of care, but at age 18 she was placed back with her mother. Irene Wiley, however, found her daughter's behavior too difficult to manage and soon turned her over to the California Department of Health. Once again, Genie was placed into institutional care, and her fate from that point remains largely unknown. Unfortunately, the care Genie received after returning to state custody was far from the nurturing environments she had previously known. Instead of compassionate foster families, she was placed in strict, often abusive homes where she suffered both verbal and physical mistreatment. It wasn't long before she began to shut down. All the progress she had made over the past 5 years slowly unraveled. She regressed. At the end of Genie, a scientific tragedy, Russ Reimer recounts a moment when psychologist J. Shirley showed him a box of photographs documenting Genie's life. The last 2 pictures shocked him. At first he thought they were of someone else. A large, bumbling woman with a facial expression of cow-like incomprehension. In one picture, she sits in a car pretending to drive, her eyes half-masked, her front teeth protruding in a drawn grin. In the second, she is indoors about to cut a birthday cake with white frosting. Her dark hair has been hacked off raggedly at the top of her forehead, giving her the aspect of an asylum inmate. Shirley watched grimly as recognition dawned on Reimer. "Her 27th birthday party," he said. "I was there. And then I saw her again when she was 29. She still looked miserable, like a chronically institutionalized person. It was heartrending. The way I think of Genie, she was this isolated person incarcerated for all those years. Then she emerged and lived in a more reasonable world for a while. She responded to this world. And then the door was shut and she withdrew again. Her soul was sick." He pointed to the photograph of Genie sitting in the car. "This is soul sickness," he said. There was no medical explanation for her decline into what appeared to be organic biological dementia. The last known update on Genie's condition came from a 2011 Guardian article. For decades after she was first discovered, she remained in state care. The authorities refused to disclose her whereabouts, stating that information about her case was confidential and did not meet the criteria for public disclosure. The only thing left to truly represent her inner world is a drawing she made in 1977, just 2 years after she was sent back into institutional care. The labels on the picture were written by someone else, but dictated by Genie herself. "I miss Mama. Mama's hand. Baby Genie." It's unclear whether these words reflect a happy memory or a longing for a childhood that never was. When asked about her life before she was rescued, a caregiver once questioned her. "What were you sitting on when you ate cereal?" "The potty chair." "Where did you stay when you lived at home?" "Where did you sleep?" "I slept in a potty chair." Genie's story is one of the most haunting and heartbreaking cases in modern psychology, a testament to both the resilience of the human spirit and the irreparable damage that isolation and neglect can cause. If you dare to explore the darkest crimes and mysteries, don't forget to like, share with fellow truth seekers, and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying revelations. Hit the bell so you don't miss any chilling story. See you in the next nightmare.